local hero is ambushed in the heart of his hometown.
It just seemed impossible.
This is not a street fight. It is a street attack.
The suspects are elusive. Their motive, a mystery.
What is most startling about it is there doesn't seem to be a reason for it.
Everyone was still absolutely clueless about what on earth had happened.
But even in the most tangled web of deceit, there's always a thread of truth. And Lieutenant Joe Kenda will stop at nothing to find it.
People avoid the truth thinking that the police are going to go away. And they're not going to come back. We have a habit of coming back.
My name is Lieutenant Joe Kenda. I've solved almost 400 homicides. Every case is unique, but there's one thing that never changes. A life has been taken. Their stories are now my stories.
It's Saturday night in downtown Colorado Springs. The bars are slammed, the streets are rowdy, and patrol officers like Mark Compt are gearing up for a busy night.
It wasn't unusual to have 3 or 4 fights in the evening. Nothing real serious, but it usually required a pretty heavy police presence.
Right on cue, Compt's radio crackles with the report of a disturbance on Nevada Avenue, downtown's main drag.
I heard the radio call for an officer asking for some more officers because he had a large fight going on. At that time, I was only a couple blocks away, so I radioed dispatch and told them I'd respond.
10-4, I'm coming from Cooper and 5th.
The dispatcher informs Compt that there's also an ambulance on the scene, loading up what appears to be one of the brawlers.
He was bleeding from the mouth and the nose. The ambulance, obviously noting that this victim was in dire distress, did a scoop and run. They picked the person up. This guy needs critical care immediately.
And that's typical on Nevada Avenue if there's a fight. Guy got thumped and, he's going to the hospital to get some stitches.
As Compt arrives on the scene, the responding officer informs him 2 of the suspected brawlers have fled down a nearby alley.
What do you got?
We got 2 males going up this way. They're suspects.
What are they wearing?
They're wearing blue shirts and blue jeans. They're involved.
Got it.
Compt peels after them. Soon, his headlights fall on 2 young men.
They looked at the cruiser and turned and took off running. They were heading right towards a building, so I just cut them off with the cruiser.
Put your hands behind your back. Do it now. Don't move.
Patting down each young man, Compt finds no weapons, but both suspects appear to have blood on their clothing.
So I placed them in the backseat of police cars and brought them back to the scene. My intention was just to drop them off to another cruiser, see if there's anything else the officers on scene needed.
That's when Officer Compt receives an update, one that takes this case to a new level.
And we received a call from an officer who went to the hospital who told us that the victim had passed from his injuries.
Which means this standard issue street fight has become a possible murder.
And now we have a crime scene that we have to protect. We have to make sure that the folks we have in custody for it are in fact involved in it. It just changes the way we approach the entire scenario.
Once the word was received that this is a homicide investigation, the officers called for more help at that time, especially from the Major Crimes Unit.
Across town, Homicide Detective Lieutenant Joe Kenda is driving home after another long night at work, when his captain calls and tells him it just got a little longer.
Go ahead for Kenda.
The basic information we're provided is that there is a fight in the street. Unknown motive, unknown circumstances to how the fight occurred. Then one man is beaten to death, literally. I bring the call team to the scene to see what we know.
Within minutes, Kenda and his men are on the scene.
Lieutenant. Gentlemen, how you doing? What do we got?
Where Officer Compt informs them he just found a third potential suspect.
He had some blood on his shirt as well, just like the other suspects that were involved. So I went over and contacted him, and he gave me the dumbfounded look, like, what are you talking to me for? I didn't ask him about it. I just, observed it, and then I put him in the back seat of the cruiser. We're not going to question him as to involvement, especially in a homicide. We leave that up to the detectives because they're going to sit him down, get him comfortable, and start asking him the questions they want to ask.
With 3 persons of interest now in custody, Kenda surveys the scene for more details.
It is extreme violence without provocation. And our job is to find out who in this group are responsible for murder. There's a large blood stain where the victim had been laying. First question is the obvious one. What happened here?
Is there any weapon used?
No, sir. It looks like he was beat to death.
The victim died as a result of blunt force trauma, multiple blows to the outside of the skull. The victim also had a lacerated liver. All of his ribs were broken. He had a punctured lung. This man has been injured from the waist up in every possible square inch of his body. He would have died from internal bleeding had he not died from the head injury.
The scope and severity of the wounds suggest there were multiple assailants. But based on the slim facts, it's possible the victim may have been killed in self-defense.
You're still kind of wondering what led to this. What's the motive for this kind of beating? Did he start the fight? Were the people originally defending themselves?
Is there anything that he did that caused any of this to happen to him? You need to find that out. You need to find that out quickly.
However the brawl started, the sheer brutality suggests it was more than a run-in between complete strangers. It might be personal.
This is not a street fight. It is a street attack. This is an incredibly savage attack. How does that happen? What's the dynamic involved?
To get a better picture of what happened, Kenda needs to talk to eyewitnesses. Officers point to a bloodied young man sitting on the sidewalk and suggest that he had the best view of the attack, right in the middle of it.
Is that the victim right there?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll go talk to him. Thanks, guys.
Well, that guy was with the guy that got beat up. And they point out a 23-year-old man named Joseph Reeves. We approached Mr. Reeves. Were you with this guy? Yes. And who is he? His name is Lane Schmidt.
Joseph Reeves explains that he and Lane were close friends.
Everybody likes him. He's married with twin daughters. Reeves has met his wife and his 2 children before. He thinks Lane's a good guy.
The description of Lane Schmidt as a mild-mannered family man only raises more questions about his death.
This person died a very painful death. What exactly is the cause of this? What's the provocation? What's the motive on these people? Or is it something that just happened?
The search for answers would soon bring Kenda and his men face to face with an unlikely set of suspects and plunge the question of motive further into mystery.
Why did this happen? I'm only interested in why, if it leads me to who.
In the early morning hours of September 22nd, 1991, Lieutenant Joe Kenda and his team are standing at the scene of a bizarre fatality. Lane Schmidt, a mild-mannered family man, has been beaten to death on a downtown sidewalk, and police are at a loss to explain why.
We'd have the fist fights, we'd have the busted lip, maybe a couple stitches, but we never had the level of beating that the victim took.
There wasn't a square inch of this kid's upper torso and body that wasn't damaged.
It was tragic. You know, a nice kid who was married, had twin daughters. You wonder in an investigation like this, what happened? Why did this happen?
You know, there was not a reason in the world to think that he would have run into trouble there.
Officers have hauled 3 persons of interest downtown for interrogation. All of them were found with blood on their clothes. Still, Kenda knows it's not enough to charge them with a crime, much less murder.
You're in a melee fight, in this case. People are very close together. People who are maybe not even involved might wind up with blood on them. We need more.
For now, Kenda is focusing his attention on Joseph Reeves, a survivor of the brawl and a self-proclaimed friend of the victim.
How you doing? I'm Joe Kenda, detective working on this. So, tell me what happened.
Reeves says, we were in town this evening. We decided we were going to go get something to eat. 3 blocks north of where the fight is a 24-hour fast food outlet. They were walking toward that location.
As they approached the corner of Pikes Peak and Nevada Avenue, a crowd of young people allegedly started harassing the 2 friends.
Look, man, we're just trying to get home, okay?
Home better be that way, because you ain't coming on our block.
Man, look.
This group of kids confronted them, said this is our sidewalk, our corner. I could see that in my mind being valid, because that's the way it was. It didn't take anything to provoke a fight.
Come and disrespect us on our turf.
Reeves and Lane tried to ignore the trash talk.
Hey, we need to go and check them.
But before Reeves knew it, the threats turned to shoves.
No, you're not trying to get anywhere, man. Come on.
Then punches.
Hey, guys, get out!
And they seemed to be coming from every direction.
Schmidt gets punched in the face, and he goes down on the ground. He is being punched, meaning Reeves. He backs up to try to extricate himself from the fight.
But once Reeves was out of harm's way, he realized that his friend was still under attack.
They got him on the ground and just proceeded to kick him and beat him. And it didn't take long for him not to make any defensive moves.
At that point, Joseph Reeves says he heard sirens, and as quickly as it started, the attack came to an end.
He sees an ambulance come up, and the ambulance people get out and come over, and the fight stops.
It's a disturbing account, one that suggests Schmidt was attacked and killed without any provocation whatsoever. But Kenda wonders if Schmidt's assailants could have been settling an old score.
Why is it that these kids are so agitated? We're trying to figure out if they all know each other. Is there a reason for them to see Schmidt and attack him as a result?
Kenda presses Reeves for answers, as well as the identities of the attackers. But Reeves can't even remember how many there were, much less recall their identities.
He's being assaulted. He can't see these people, not clearly. And if he does, he doesn't remember what he saw.
Reeves may not be able to ID a suspect, but he claims there's something Kenda should know about the victim. Something that quickly turns the situation from bad to worse.
Tell me about your buddy.
We're in the Army together.
You guys are in the Army right now?
Yes, sir.
Reeves tells us we're both in the Army, 1st to the 12th Infantry, 4th Infantry Division, Fort Carson. How can this be? How can we kill one of the people who's supposed to defend us?
For detectives, the military connection poses another difficult question. Was Lane Schmidt assaulted because he was an officer?
It could have been a motive for the incident, and that's one area we have to look at.
But if Schmidt's occupation was a factor, his fellow soldier is at a loss to explain why.
Reeves says that they are attacked without provocation. They are both simultaneously assaulted. That's all he knows.
With no further questions for Reeves, Kenda finds a new eyewitness. 20-year-old Dan Davis.
He has long blonde hair, kind of a surfer dude kind of kid.
You witnessed this fight?
Yeah, I was hanging out over here with some buddies just having a couple.
Davis says he's not so sure the crowd on the corner was as aggressive as Reeves made it out to be. They weren't rival soldiers or even a bunch of street toughs looking for a fight. They were teenagers from Fountain Fort Carson High School.
Most of these kids, they came from good backgrounds. It was surprising they would be involved in something like this.
According to Dan Davis, he'd witnessed the kids socializing on Nevada Avenue earlier that evening.
The kids refer to it as the Ave. That's where everybody goes. There are girls present, there are boys present. The music is blaring.
Let's go, put it up for the team. Yeah!
Everybody's doing what kids do, particularly when they've had a few drinks.
Davis goes on to tell Kenda that around 11:30 a fight broke out. So he tried to stop it, the only way he knew how.
He yelled cops, knowing that when you yell cops, people stop doing what they're doing and run off.
Kenda asks Davis if he can identify any of the kids involved, but he's not much more help than Sergeant Reeves was.
He didn't know who was in the fight, he just knew he wasn't in it. Since we had no evidence to the contrary, we let him go.
It's a good chance I'll be calling you again.
Yes, sir.
All right?
I'm going.
Frustrated, Kenda turns to gathering hard evidence. He has forensics sweep the scene and take samples from every drop of blood they find.
There was a great deal of blood at the scene, not only in the area where the victim was laying, but also up on the sidewalk. They did take samples of that blood for a couple of reasons, to see if any of that blood belonged to the victim or if that blood belonged to any of the suspects.
While the blood evidence is being collected, Kenda heads to the station to speak with the 3 young men in custody.
They have blood on their clothing, blood on their person. The next step is to see what they are willing to say or what they do say about that event.
Kenda starts with the blood-covered suspect who wasn't caught fleeing the scene. 16-year-old junior Sean Stansel.
Tell us what you were doing in the park the other night. We were just having a nice time. We were partying, drinking.
He has no criminal history, but he's a kid who is a student at Fountain High School, who is an athlete.
You would not think that he would be the type of kid who would be involved in this type of activity.
Beyond his squeaky clean record, Sean's background indicates that he's the type of kid who would want to be a soldier, not the type who would want to beat one up.
His father is in the Army. This is totally out of character for Sean Stansel.
Sean explains that he was hanging out with his girlfriend when the fight broke out. Without thinking, he jumped in, but only to play the part of peacemaker.
John tried to break up the fight. This would account for any blood transfer that could have been found on his clothing.
Kenda wants to know whose blood is on Sean's t-shirt. Sean is certain it belongs to one of Schmidt's attackers, but Sean is adamant that he's not one of them, nor does he know who they are.
You didn't see who was punching, kicking?
I don't know, it's just I couldn't tell who was doing what. There's just so many people.
He could say there were people there. He could see color and clothing, but he was not able to positively identify a potential suspect.
To Kenda, Sean Stansel's story could ring true, but he'll have to confirm that the blood on Sean's shirt isn't Lane Schmidt's.
This man has been repeatedly punched and kicked. The first blow produces blood. The second blow disperses it. There is going to be medium velocity blood spatter coming off of his body and on to the people assaulting him.
After collecting Sean's clothing and delivering it to the lab for analysis, Kenda turns his attention to the 2 other potential suspects, Kevin Moore and Anthony Phoenix.
They're both 18 years old. They both go to Fountain High School. They are athletes on the football team. The blood in their clothing would indicate that it was appropriate they got arrested.
First up for questioning is the school's star quarterback, Anthony Phoenix.
Mr. Phoenix has never been in jail, never been arrested for anything. But here he is, in our custody now. So what are you doing, Anthony? What are you doing downtown?
According to Anthony, he was just hanging out on Nevada Avenue like everyone else.
I was just out having fun, man, chilling with my friends.
As for how the blood got on his clothes, Anthony claims he wound up in the brawl by accident.
Someone's blood could have swung off and landed on my shirt.
He heard a bunch of noise from a group of people, and he walked to see what was happening with that group of people, and at that point, he found himself in the middle of a fight.
He did say that he got hit in the back. He spun around and started swinging wildly, blindly, trying to hit anything that may have possibly hit him.
Anthony claims he can't remember exactly who he swung at, but he's positive they were on their feet, and therefore not Lane Schmidt.
He didn't know who he was fighting, other than it was a large group of people fighting, and that's why he had blood on him.
It's a plausible story, but Kenda isn't convinced. Needing more information, he turns to Phoenix's teammate, Kevin Moore.
He's a linebacker on the football team. He has the physical size to prove it. He's 6'2", muscular, very good shape. So what happened, Kevin?
Kevin's story is the haziest of all. He tells Kenda he had one too many drinks that night and passed out in a friend's car.
He actually said that he was asleep in the back of a car, and he was awakened, I believe, by somebody who said that, hey, Anthony's involved in a fight, go stop it.
What?
According to Kevin, he bulldozed his way through the crowd and dragged his friend Anthony Phoenix away from the brawl.
And that's how he gets the blood on him.
And what happened then? He says somebody said the cops are coming. So we ran. And then what? Well, we got arrested.
Kenda is skeptical. Each of the young men in custody claims to have been sucked into the fight almost by accident, and they all deny laying a finger on Lane Schmidt.
You have multiple people involved in a melee fight. They have blood on their clothing. They can't establish who is actually involved in the assault itself. Not possible to do. So you look at this in total, and you say, what is this? You're back to the phase of who's lying and who isn't.
For Kenda, there's only one surefire way to find out. He collects the bloody clothing from Anthony Phoenix and Kevin Moore and drops them off at the lab as well.
If we're able to determine that the blood, for example, on Kevin Moore's shoes is most likely that of the victim, then that's pretty damning evidence as to where Kevin's feet were at the time that victim was on the ground.
But with so much blood evidence to analyze, it could be weeks or months before tests are complete. With a dead soldier on his hands and 3 high schoolers in custody, Kenda wonders if this case could get any worse. Just then, he receives an alarming phone call, one that reveals not only a new suspect, but the chilling promise of even more bloodshed.
Somebody threatened her and said she better not tell the cops what she saw, or she would be next.
Army Specialist Lane Schmidt has been beaten to death in the streets of Colorado Springs. And Lieutenant Joe Kenda is no closer to understanding what happened or who is responsible.
You have witnesses, all kids, all more than willing to lie to you, all more than willing to minimize their friends' involvement. It is a cobweb of information.
So far, Kenda's only hope for hard evidence is the bloody clothing collected from the 3 teenagers in custody: Anthony Phoenix, Kevin Moore, and Sean Stansel. All 3 boys maintain their innocence, but detectives can't help but wonder if forensic testing will prove otherwise.
Blood evidence became extremely important because it attached itself to several of the suspects.
Well, if they got a large amount of Schmidt's blood on their shoes, that's pretty good evidence that they were involved.
It could be weeks or months before the blood work comes back, And whatever the results, they won't answer Kenda's most burning question. Why would anyone want to kill Lane Schmidt?
There's no connection to the victim. This is a mob attack of a perfect stranger motivated by nothing more than circumstance and location. What's the motive here? We don't see one. And that's what makes this an extremely difficult case to work.
Kenda still hasn't ruled out the possibility that this was more than some chance encounter that turned deadly. He needs a new witness, someone who can connect the dots between Lane Schmidt and his alleged attackers.
Kind of wondered what else was out there, what really led this to happen. Was there anybody else involved that we just don't know about?
No sooner have detectives started mulling over that notion than Kenda receives a frantic phone call from a woman whose daughter attends Fountain Fort Carson High. She says her daughter may know something about Lane Schmidt's death, but she's afraid to come forward, with good reason.
Do you know the nature of the threats?
He just said if she told me.
She says somebody called my daughter yesterday at the house and threatened her and said she better not tell the cops what she saw, or she would be next.
Is that hearsay? Yeah, but it gives us something to work with. We have to then go investigate that.
Kenda's next move is to question the young girl who was threatened, Tanya Starr.
So tell us about this threat.
I got a phone call this morning from a friend of mine.
Tanya was a young female Fountain Fort Carson student, and that was pretty consistent with the crowd at the scene.
And we say, well, you were there, weren't you? I was there. What'd you see?
Tanya claims that it's not so much what she saw, but what she heard. After the fight was over, she shared a ride home with a boy from school. And what he said left Tanya terrified.
After the fight, she heard him say, "So we killed that dude. So what?" Really?
It's the closest thing to a confession detectives have heard yet, and enough to bump this unknown male to the top of the suspect list. Detectives asked Tanya if she can ID the person who made the remark.
His name's Dominic Perea.
She came up with the name of Dominic Perea. Once again, another Fountain Fort Carson High School student.
According to Tanya, Dominic is a 17-year-old senior and a friend of Anthony, Kevin, and Sean. Unlike the three kids in custody, however, Dominic has a history of bad behavior.
Dominic, a little bit more of a shaded past, more involved, more prone to physical action, possibly getting involved in fights.
Dominic's past also taught him how to cover his tracks, and he wanted to make sure no one told the police anything, including Tanya.
He basically told me that if I told anyone about the fight that happened, that he would kill me.
She had a conversation with Dominic Perea, and he told her not to mention it or she could get hurt as a result.
Kenda has heard enough. After wrapping up with Tanya, he and his team set out in search of Dominic Perea.
Now, when you have a threat put forward to a witness, it's important you move with all possible speed to arrest that individual that made that threat.
It will take more than Tanya's statement to prove that Dominic Perea was responsible for Lane Schmidt's death.
So you're looking for physical evidence that backed up or supportive of statements. We obviously are interested in obtaining any physical evidence that's going to link him to the victim.
As with the other young men in custody, Kenda believes the key to determining Dominic's involvement could be trace evidence found in his clothing. Fortunately, witnesses provided a detailed description of what Dominic was wearing the night of the fight.
We have a search warrant for these items of clothing. We want those clothes in the event they contain blood or blood of the victim.
Lieutenant Kenda and his men arrive at the Perea residence, where they sit Dominic down with his mother.
The reason we're here is we have several witnesses to say that you were involved in that fight the other night.
But as they grill him about the incident, Dominic claims he has nothing to confess.
You had nothing to do with the fight itself? What happened?
He denies involvement in the fight. He says he was there, he was downtown, never saw a fight, that's it. Doesn't know anything about it.
Kenda tells Dominic that if he wasn't involved in the assault, then he won't mind handing over the clothes he was wearing.
Where are the clothes you wore that night?
I washed them.
You washed them? Why'd you do that?
I'm kind of a neat freak. I like to keep a tidy house. I do laundry almost every day.
She provided an explanation that her task, her routine with him was he'd come home, throw his clothes on the floor, she would pick them up and clean them.
It's a frustrating setback. Just as they're about to leave, however, Kenda spots one item that wasn't washed.
Sit on your shoe.
But we noticed what looks like blood on one of Dominic's shoes. It's not a lot of blood, but it is blood. You're in the violent crime business, you know blood when you see it. So we take his shoes for evidentiary purpose, terminate the interview, and we place him in custody.
While Dominic's shoes are sent to the crime lab, Dominic is taken to the county lockup. With the blood work still pending, Kenda can't help but wonder if all 4 of the teenagers in custody could be involved in Lane Schmidtke's death. Or were some actually innocent as they claim?
Well, it's not unusual that they would be all together on Nevada Avenue on Saturday night with a little alcohol in their system. Is there a reason for them to be beyond just being kids and having a few drinks?
Little does Kenda realize, eyewitness testimony is about to bring the whole hideous picture into focus and bring cops and civilians face to face with the shocking truth.
It was horrible. People were left just holding their hands open and shaking their heads.
It is extreme violence, savage violence. It is almost primal in nature.
Army specialist and young father Lane Schmidtke was fatally beaten in the streets of Colorado Springs. Despite Lieutenant Joe Kenda's efforts to solve the case quietly, the word is out that a soldier is dead and that 4 high schoolers are being held as suspects.
It just seemed impossible. How can you have 2 people walking down the street in a military town and they just get ravaged? I mean, what an embarrassment is that?
The community was both frightened and outraged. It put another level of pressure on the investigation.
The 4 high school students in custody all maintain they had no part in the soldier's death. But detectives are counting on blood analysis of their clothing to determine who's telling the truth.
If I find the victim's blood on a suspect, it's more than you were just in the area. You were an active member of the party that assaulted Lane Schmidtke.
Even if the blood work ties all 4 suspects to Schmidtke's assault, it still won't answer the million-dollar question.
When Schmidtke and Reeves come by, why do they have to attack them? You have a bunch of kids that weren't known to be real troublemakers, you know, a scrap here and there, nothing like what happened this night.
How did these people come together and kill someone over nothing, which is what it appears to be happening?
Lieutenant Joe Kenda suspects the answer, and possibly more witnesses may be hiding in the halls of Fountain Fort Carson High.
There are 2 things that are very, very important to kids. One is a code of silence. You don't ever tell an adult what's really going on. And as a policeman, you're just another adult. The second item is loyalty. They have friends, they have enemies. Their version of events will be influenced by their loyalty. They may have a friend involved. They'll identify someone else to protect that friend.
Experience tells Kenda that students who weren't directly involved in the attack, but may have knowledge of how it transpired, are more likely to let down their guard. So Kenda puts in a few calls to Fountain Fort Carson faculty members, telling them to keep their ears open.
We want everybody that we could possibly identify to get to the bottom of the story as to who saw what and who saw who do what.
Detective Kenda, homicide.
The principal at Fountain Fort Carson informs Kenda that he has rounded up a group of female students who claim to have witnessed the crime.
You gotta get all those people, get them identified, get them interviewed, and figure out from those interviews what really happened.
Kenda gathers the students and questions them about the night of the brawl. The girls say it all began when some boys from their school started fighting with 2 GIs.
Look, man, we're just trying to get home, okay?
Home better be that way, because you ain't coming home.
Man, look.
Kenda thinks he's heard all of this before, until the girls drop a bombshell.
There were 2 guys, they were military guys, GIs.
2 different GIs.
Yeah, 2 different ones.
And this was before the fight?
Yeah, before the fight.
That exchange, those individuals that were involved at that point were not the same 2 soldiers.
It did not involve Schmidt. It involved 2 other guys in a vehicle who had left the area.
This is the first Kenda has heard about a fight with 2 other GIs. He asks the girls to explain in detail what happened.
They say that 2 GIs pull up in a car.
Hey, what you ladies doing out here?
They exchange words with some girls, because they, of course, are interested in the girls. And then some boys get involved, and they're telling the GIs to leave their girls alone, and it becomes a little heated. They kick the car these guys are in, and they're yelling at them to get out of there. They drive off. End of contact. End of disturbance.
Trying to steal my girl. What are they talking about, man? Anthony Phoenix runs this city.
But the adrenaline hadn't worn off, and the boys were ready to swing at anyone who even looked like a soldier. Then, just minutes later, Schmidt and Reeves happened to walk down the very same block. The girls noticed the men's military haircuts and sensed there might be trouble.
No, like they are really. Oh, man. Let's go this way.
One of the girls in the crowd actually went up to him and said, you know, you might want to cross the street. My friends are in a bad mood. They're being violent, and I don't want to see anybody hurt.
Lane looked at her and said, hey, we're not doing anything. We're just walking up the street. And they advanced into the crowd for the purpose of walking through it.
And that's all Reeves and Schmidt did. But their appearance alone was enough to set off the boys.
And they were accosted and being yelled at, what are you doing on our street? This is our corner, this is our turf. And then one of the individuals in the crowd approached Lane Schmidt and struck him. The fight ensued from that point.
It's an eye-opening account, one that finally lends a motive to the assault on Lane Schmidt. These teenagers wanted revenge on a pair of soldiers, and any 2 soldiers would do.
By learning about the first confrontation with a soldier this group had, that provides me, in my view, with the impetus for the second attack. These kids are all together, they're functioning as a group, they're angry, they've been drinking. In the words of one girlfriend, they're looking for trouble. The encounter with the first soldier motivates them to have trouble with yet another soldier. Those kids, filled with a little alcohol and raging hormones, become a pack of hyenas. And they decided to attack the first gazelle that came out of the tree line. And that happened to be Mr. Schmidt.
But the question remains, who exactly was responsible for the attack on Lane Schmidt? The girls claim to know the answer.
They may not have all seen the same thing, but they all had enough witness information to positively identify these people.
But there's one name on the list that catches Kenda off guard and sends his men on the hunt for the unlikeliest of killers.
He has no criminal history, but he's moved from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour because we're arresting him for murder.
The search for Lane Schmidt's killers has led Lieutenant Joe Kenda and his detectives to Fountain Fort Carson High School, where a group of female students claim to know exactly who killed Schmidt and why.
They're downtown, on the Ave, as the kids like to say. When all of this takes place, they witness it. They see it happen.
The girls claim a run-in with a different pair of soldiers prompted some high school boys to unleash on the next GIs they saw, which just happened to be Schmidt and Reeves. Kenda asked the girls which of their guy friends threw the first punch, half expecting the answer to be known bad boy Dominic Perea. But according to the girls, it wasn't Dominic. It was the school's star quarterback, Anthony Phoenix.
Everybody liked Anthony Phoenix, but as the night wore on, he changed. He was looking for some trouble.
They say that Anthony Phoenix was the first guy to hit the victim and knock him down. That Anthony punched him in the face, and down he went.
According to the girls, that's when 3 of Phoenix's friends jumped in.
They say Kevin Moore, Dominic Perea, and Sean Stansel punched and kicked the victim repeatedly in the head and the upper body.
If the girls are telling the truth, then police already have the 4 culprits in custody. But the girls aren't finished. They tell detectives that before the assault was over, 2 more of Phoenix's friends joined in.
They identified 2 people, one being Robert Dean, and the second one being Dan Davis.
It's the first Kenda has heard of 9th grader Robert Dean, but the name Dan Davis immediately rings a bell. Davis was the helpful young man who'd been forthcoming with Kenda at the crime scene.
They had no idea that the person they were talking to was involved in the assault on Schmidt.
Armed with multiple statements naming Davis as one of the perpetrators, Kenda decides it's time to pay this former Good Samaritan a visit.
People avoid the truth, thinking that the police are going to go away, and they're not going to come back. We have a habit of coming back.
Kenda knocks on Davis's front door. When the suspect answers, they confront him on the spot.
Dan, remember us?
Hey guys, what's up?
We're the guys you lied to?
It is not difficult at all to deal with a amateur who's being interrogated by the police.
I mean, I was just there. I was just pulling people off.
We have several witnesses that put you there, kicking the people on the ground.
I didn't kick him.
Teenage kid presents no challenge at all. He's going to lie. He's going to lie badly. Then you're going to step on his fingers, and he's going to tell you the truth.
The fight, I was just there trying to break it up.
I was just pulling people off the guy.
Davis quickly offers a confession, but it's not much of one.
Dude, you were kicking the guys.
I kicked him maybe once.
So you were kicking him?
But just once.
His ultimate statement was that when the attack occurred, he was there, but he was down at Schmidt's feet, kicking around the feet area.
According to Davis, he couldn't possibly have struck a fatal blow to the soldier, which makes him guilty of assault, but not murder. Kenda disagrees.
I might have kicked him just a couple times.
Turn around, put your hands behind your back.
There's no way that could have hurt him.
Turn around.
Everybody played a part, but nobody believed they killed anybody. They hit the victim, yes. They kicked the victim, yes, but they might have only done it a couple of times. They don't feel guilt, not over murder. They're just in a fight. But the combination of these blows is a murder. We advise him of his rights. We place him under arrest and put him in jail.
With Davis in custody, Kenda sets out in search of his 6th and final suspect, Robert Dean.
Mr. Dean is only 14 years old, but he's 6 feet tall and he weighs 160 pounds. And he certainly doesn't look like he's 14 years old.
Kenda confronts Dean with the allegations against him. Dean denies everything. But once again, Kenda notices a telltale bit of evidence.
How'd you get the blood on your shoes? That is blood, isn't it?
It's blood.
We see blood on his shoes. We take that for evidence and we jail him.
On April 22nd, 1992, Kenda finally receives the blood work that could prove critical to the case. But the results are mixed.
The shoes worn by Sean Stansel are identified as having the victim's blood on them. The shoes worn by Kevin Moore are identified as having the victim's blood on them. But all of the rest of the blood samples that are found on various people's clothing and shoes are all classified by the laboratory as unknown, saying that there's insufficient amounts to conduct a phenotyping test without destroying the sample, which they will not do. So the remainder of the blood evidence, it is human blood, and it is on all these other items of the other 4 defendants, but the laboratory cannot say it belongs to the victim.
It's a disappointing outcome, but that doesn't stop Kenda from slapping murder charges on all 6 suspects.
The physical evidence is limited, but we have an enormous amount of testimony from a significant number of eyewitnesses who consistently identify the perpetrators involved in the case.
3 were juveniles, 3 were adults. All were charged by the district attorney's office as adults.
You hear the argument, well, they're just kids. And individually, they didn't do much harm. Oh, please. They willfully and knowingly and with collusion engaged in an assault on an individual, killing him. That makes them all equally responsible in my eyes.
Over the following year, each of the 6 defendants is found guilty for crimes ranging from manslaughter to first-degree assault. Dan Davis and Robert Dean are each sentenced to several years probation.
Robert Dean, when he ultimately violated his probation, ended up doing 3 years in DOC.
Kevin Moore is sentenced to 12 years of hard time in prison. Sean Stansel and Dominic Perea receive 16 apiece. The steepest sentence of all is handed down to the young man who started the fight, star quarterback Anthony Phoenix.
Anthony was ultimately convicted of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 24 years in prison. I think justice was served in this case. I don't think anybody really intended to kill anybody that night, but their consequences caused the death of somebody that night.
To this day, the murder of Lane Schmidt, a respected soldier and loving father, carries a chilling reminder that murder can claim the life of anyone, anytime, anywhere.
Mob violence, group violence, it is a rare thing. But when it happens, it's certainly a reminder that we haven't advanced very far as a civilization. How does a group of seemingly intelligent people become a pack of hyenas in a matter of 30 minutes? I don't know. I only know about the result. But when you see that kind of behavior, it's certainly indicative of what humans are capable of in the wrong circumstances.